think when you have an enterprise sales company, the problem is that you can build really bad product.
Yeah.
Because you have this guy who's just convincing somebody to buy something. So then you think you actually mistakenly think your software is actually good and you actually have market fit because you happen to sell, let's say, $100,000 software package to some person. But I actually am of the belief that you don't really know if you've made a sale until the second sale with that person. When they actually renew is when the actual sale happens.
Yeah.
I actually think the first sale in a SaaS software company is a paid trial.
Yeah.
It's basically they're saying, you know what, we're going to try this out. We're going to see if we like this enough. Now, they maybe did a true free trial with you, but normally that's not big enough to really know if it works, right? So then they pay you $10,000 or $20,000, and then they're doing a real trial with you.
Yeah.
And if you don't have them then sign up that second time, you've never really made the sale.
That's really good insight. Okay, everybody, welcome back to the Startup Ignition podcast. We are so excited for our guest today. I'm Tyler Richards. This is John Richards, your host, and we are super excited. Today we call him JP. We went over this before the podcast. No one else really calls him JP, and we figured out why. It's because you're John. He's John. My brother's John. So we have to differentiate somehow. So
it is interesting. Sometimes when we go golfing.
The foursome, three Johns and a Tyler. There we go. But we have John Pestana with us today, and I have a little intro. And John is a seasoned entrepreneur, also our very good friend, best known probably for his co-founding of Omniture, right? A web analytics company that went public in 2006, right? 2006. Yep. And it was acquired by Adobe in 2009 for $1.8 billion. And I think that was Utah's first over $1 billion acquisition in the history of Utah, right?
I believe so in the tech world.
Yeah, I think so. And he's currently CEO of ObservePoint, which is a leading data governance company. But beyond his business ventures, John just does more than that. He serves as the chairman of the board for Libertas Institute, advocating for liberty and free market principles. In 2022, you were inducted into the Silicon Slopes Hall of Fame, which we attended, which was an
deservedly so.
Very deservedly so. You know, the first $1 billion tech acquisition in Utah. That better be in the Hall of Fame.
I'm going to interrupt this incredible rosy because it's not rosy enough. JP, John Pestana, Lehigh would still be sagebrush if it weren't for him.
Yeah, you kicked off the tech ecosystem.
There's been a lot of great people.
Viewers, it's true. Go look at the history. It would be sagebrush.
Yes.
And it's now an incredible city with hospitals, Porsche dealerships, skyscrapers, the center of Utah's tech scene because of this man right here.
Well,
and so
lots of great people.
Not only that, he's an all-around fun guy, hilarious guy, smart guy, and just all around good dude. So let's welcome to the podcast, John Pestana.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for saying my name right.
I know. I was going to say, it's Pestana like banana, not Pestana like banana.
It's but you did say it's Libertas.
Oh, Libertas. Okay,
yes, there you go.
Not Libertas.
That one, I don't know.
Yeah,
we say it all the different ways. But yeah, it is funny. Everybody always wants to say Pestana, but we say Pestana.
Yeah. I remember golfing
I broke my hand.
Like, it's banana.
Because of Spanish,
Pestana,
you want
like
to say Pestana, but when you said banana Pestana, I never forgot.
Yeah, same. I keep it. Okay, so JP or Johnny P or Banana.
JP's great.
So we always start the podcast off just to get everybody loose. We like to do like an icebreaker event, and so like we do like a little fun back and forth game. Usually it's just me and my dad on the podcast, so we do like a father-son thing. But today I'm going to do a startup edition.
Am I your first external guest?
Yes. Well, we'll see which one we release first, but you are one of two first guests that we have.
Nice.
We're yet to decide which one we're going to release first.
Yeah.
But we're going to play a startup edition.
So that means that's pressure on me to perform.
Yeah,
there we go.
You got to get us views. You got to get us followers, subscribers. We're going to play Would You Rather.
Okay.
And so we're going to do Startup Edition. And I have some pretty good ones, but AI assisted me.
Yeah.
in coming up with
Is this him only or me too?
No, everybody.
Okay,
all
got
of
it.
us. Okay, but mainly you two. And then I'll put in some 2 cents if it calls for it. Okay, are you ready?
Yeah.
Would you rather raise $100 million VC round, but lose control of your company, or bootstrap your business and grow 10x slower?
Yeah, for me, it would be bootstrap.
Bootstrapping.
Yeah, every year I have friends get fired from their own companies by their investors.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because that's actually how I always think of it too. It's like, I tell people when you know, because obviously I have people call me all the time for mentorship. And I always say, the moment you raise money, you're actually have a boss.
Yeah, you're a servant.
You have a boss.
Yeah.
So that's that. A lot, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't realize like how big of a deal that is. Like, because they'll raise money so fast. Like even that couple $100,000 from somebody, it's like, well, you have a boss now. There's one person you got to pick up the phone and talk to.
Yeah, 3 episodes ago, we talked about raising money the holy grail in entrepreneurship, and a lot of startup founders that are uninformed and very budding entrepreneurs think it is, and it's like, it's not. Right?
I always describe it as it's like getting a loan on your house.
Yeah.
Was that good or not? How would it facilitate?
It depends how you utilize it, right?
And there's also the science behind it. Once you take money, you're beholden to the business model you have told them, and you will not want to tell them you were wrong, so you won't pivot properly to the winning business model.
I would, but that's okay.
But that's a problem for a lot of entrepreneurs because the concrete starts hardening around exactly what you're going to do, and if you take too much too soon, you can blow it.
Totally.
Okay. Now, we have 4 of these. So
let's do it.
Let's go a little quicker because we want to talk to you.
We gave some good insights.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah. Okay, number 2. Would you rather relive the .com crash or the housing crash with what you know today? Would you rather relive the .com crash or the housing crash with what you know today? And I'm asking you two because, you actually, I was in the .com. I was 13.
I suffered through both.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking both of you.
I'll go first and just say,
the markets play a big role in entrepreneurship here.
Yeah,
so.
but it depends. If you want to relive the whole era, both would be fun because we could capitalize knowing what we know now.
Yeah.
Because
which one would you?
But even if it was just the crash, we now know what we would. The time to invest is in the down market cycle.
So taking all that in consideration, which one, the .com or the housing
I would
crash?
relive the housing crash just because at that point I already had a lot of money, so I could take advantage of all that was going on.
Made my money in .com era, so I agree. The housing crash, things got really low. The Dow was at 5,500 in March of 2009.
And the Dow's at what today? I think we were just looking at it this morning. It's
tens of thousands,
50,000. I could look it up right here.
But I'm just saying, I agree with JP on that one. Yep.
Okay, so and by the way, the Dow is at 44,000.
Yeah.
44,000. That's insane.
I had no idea. I own only one stock in the whole wide world.
What is that? What's that?
Just Domo, because Josh. I'm on the board, and Josh co-founded it or founded it.
Yeah. So okay, here we go. Would you rather work on a startup solving a huge problem and super innovating, or build a company in a boring industry and make millions quickly? So easy business model, making lots of cash and easy, or solving a huge problem and super innovating?
That's a tough one for me. They both sound super fun. Yeah. So I've never had any issue with like a boring thing, because to me, taking care of customers and just being involved is really fun.
And building value.
Is like,
well, we've all
I'd
listened.
say even what I'm in right now is a little boring.
We all listened to the All On podcast with Naval from AngelList. He talked about this very topic, right?
Yeah.
What he was working on, what he likes to work on.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a coin toss. That's totally 50-50 for me.
Yeah, me too.
For me, I would honestly rather work in a boring and easy and growing market than I would probably super innovating, because
I don't like the word easy, because I don't mind.
Nothing's easy.
I don't mind the challenges too. Actually, I love like really pushing my mind and trying to solve complicated problems.
Yeah.
So.
I think the reason is because if you've had an exit and have enough money not to have to worry anymore, then you're probably more inclined to say it's 50-50. But if you're saying, I want to make another pile of cash, you might go in the boring one that's easier to make.
Yeah. Okay, last one, and then we're going to cut to the real part of the podcast here and get into JP's head and talk to you and have some awesome conversation around news that's happening today. But the last one, here we go. Ready?
Yep.
Would you rather go back in time and change one decision from a past venture, or fast forward to see the future of your next venture? So go back in time and change a decision about a past venture, or fast forward and see the future of your current or next venture.
probably go back and change something.
Yeah. Wow.
I would too, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because you guys lived through the .com era, a lot of high stakes and value being created and opportunities that you might have seized on and you might not have seized on. I could see that. For me, I'm thinking future. I'd love to see what's coming and what I could do, or, what I could.
But one or two critical changes in the past could have changed mistakes or other people's fortunes, fortunes.
I'm sitting.
I was thinking, like, for me, I was specifically thinking of like even our timing of selling Omniture.
Yeah, I'm sitting here with two guys that have taken the company public.
Possible because the economy was just, and we were kind of forced a little bit to do that.
Yeah, we'll talk about this later, but like on Omniture, you guys got like a 6x, and later on, Qualtrics got a 20x.
Well, right? Let's move. That's a great segue. Okay, thanks for the game. Great icebreaker. Okay, this is a safe place. This is where we can talk about whatever. We love hosting the podcast with guests and having differentiating opinions. But let's move into, before we get into anything critical thinking like that, let's talk about your history, because and I think my dad has a huge history with you. I've known you myself for 15, 20 years, and he's known you for probably more. So we just have a really rich history with JP, and we know a lot of parts of your story that probably a lot of people don't know.
Your dad's definitely one of my closest friends.
In history. So it's
right back at you.
So let's go all the way back to JP Interactive, and probably when you met my dad.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, even before. I mean, I know the history, so I want you to start.
Hey, see, you call yourself JP. We can call you JP Interactive.
I might have written that, though.
Oh, maybe.
Okay.
So I actually sign all my emails, JP.
JP? Yeah, there we go.
Let's go back to Lynn Mkel's class.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And you had started JP Interactive by yourself by then. So tell about the story in the class and how and how you recruited help. And JP Interactive, I also want to hear the wedding gift story.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, how I got kind of started in the tech world, I actually served a Mormon mission in Brazil. And I was a music major when I left on my mission. I was actually a vocal performance major at Rick's College.
To sing?
Yeah, to singing.
Oh.
So I loved singing.
That's awesome.
And I was kind of, the plan was like become a choir director or something like that. But my mom had actually told me I needed to make more money. I think her exact number is like, you need to be making at least like $250,000 a year.
Yeah.
And which is funny. Today, that doesn't sound like much. But back then it was like saying $2 million a year.
Yeah.
And so I was on my mission, and I was just like, man, I got to figure out a way to make more money. And that's when I decided to change to business and computers. And so I came home and I started getting involved in the internet, and I went and joined the Internet Club at BYU, which was kind of more like a Unix users group really back then. And so I was in the Information Systems 201 class, and I was participating in this Internet Club. So I already knew a little bit about all this stuff. And the teacher, Dr. Mkel, he had said a few things that were just a little out of date. Not like they were just totally wrong, but just a little out of date. And I corrected him in class the first day. And at the end of class, he said, hey, there's going to be some group projects. Well, this guy comes down at the end of class, he goes, hey, can I be in your group? And that was Josh James.
Yeah, he was basically in the last row, tilting in his seat, not paying attention.
And he used to call me Front Row Joe, because I just learned early that I don't think I have like crazy ADHD, but I have a little bit of that, you know, and I always found that if I sat in the front of class, I could pay attention way
and
learn better.
Yeah.
So I'd always sit in the front row in every class I was ever in.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Josh came, and we ended up building websites. I basically built his and Jeff Scalzon's, who's actually...
You're not saying that why Josh ran up to get to you is because he goes, that guy knows more than the professor.
Yeah. Josh is a smart guy. And I don't know. I know different things than what Lynn Mkel knew. And so I helped them throughout the semester. Well, I ended up getting married in April, and my ex-wife now, Heidi, and I sold all of our wedding presents, and we had some savings, and we bought our first computer to basically start the company, which called JP Graphics at the time. Actually.
Oh, wow.
Oh, really? First name was JP
Graphics. So I was starting off just doing graphics design and just helping people design things, and then design their websites. And then I changed it to JP Interactive.
And this year, what year was this?
This was 1996.
96.
Yeah, April of 96. And so then
the same year Netscape went public, the birth of the internet, right?
And then changed it to JP Interactive when we started doing more actual programming and stuff like that. And this is just like months later.
Yeah.
And Josh came on board. He basically moved down to LA, I think, or was doing some acting or something that summer.
He was a theater major.
Yeah, he was a theater. I don't know if that was his major. I think he was actually entrepreneurship was his actual major.
Okay.
But he loved doing
Theatrical
acting
stuff.
and theatrical stuff. He
Yeah.
was actually in Young Ambassadors. And so he came back after that summer, and we were always talking business, like always sharing ideas. And he had some business ideas when he came back and said, hey, well, why don't you just join me and why don't you sell websites and I'll build them.
Yeah.
And that's actually how we got started. And that's when I think that's about the time we changed to JP Interactive. And then instead of having it be John Pestana, it was now James
JP.
Pestana.
Oh, James
is what we just started
Pestana.
telling everybody. But yeah, the JP originally was just John Pestana. And then it made it easy. We didn't even have to change the name of the company. I just started telling people something different.
So fun. So, okay. So then you two were doing websites.
Yeah.
How did you come? And just to set for our listeners and viewers, at the time, the worldwide leader in measuring performance of websites was a company called WebTrends. That was
And they were even honestly still pretty young and
Pretty
getting
young then,
started.
too.
I mean, even like my first tool I ever used was a tool called Analog,
Right.
which would look at a server log and analyze it. And WebTrends at that time was a server log company too.
So after a year or two of doing websites, so somehow you came up with the idea, let's make a web-based analytics company. Is that right?
Yeah, it was the first real like SaaS analytics company, and
One of the first SaaS companies ever, and like right?
yeah, and we were inspired because there was counters out there, and
Yeah.
there was a couple other minor analytics applications out there.
But did you have a need to offer your website clients analytics? and
No,
performance
actually,
management?
how it came about is my friend Jeremy Young. If you
Yes.
guys remember
Mhm.
Jeremy, Jeremy
No,
was
Jeremy,
one of
yeah.
the co-founders of vServers
Yeah.
with Steve Jenkins.
Yeah, yes.
And I had built their website for them. So that's how I knew him. So Jeremy came to me and said, hey, I have this idea. Well, the idea was actually he had seen a site called Freestats, which was actually started by Matt Heaton here locally.
Wow. Okay.
And it was a basic stats application that had like 5 reports. And he showed it to me and he was like, hey, could you do something like this? I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And we had always struggled with getting analytics also for our own customers. So I definitely related to the problem, right?
Yeah.
And so then I basically, with my team, built, this stats application in just like a week. And then we just started iterating like crazy, So you had other people out there that were trying to do something like this free stats company, but we were just iterating so much faster.
You were just smaller, quicker. Yeah. Moving faster.
At that time, Matt especially, who's actually one of my neighbors now, he had other things going on. He was doing Computer Warehouse and those other companies here. And he ended up doing Bluehost here locally. So he's a super successful entrepreneur.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so we just focused in on that stats and just started building it like crazy.
Wow.
And just to, again, we got a lot of viewers mostly going to be entrepreneurial and they want to know about the venture ecosystem. So what was going on was WebTrends, though, was you had to take their heavy software and load it on your servers, and it would be loaded on your
You
servers.
didn't actually load it on your servers. You loaded it onto a desktop, but you took the logs off of your server and
so it
loaded
post-process logs.
Post-process. So like basically at the end of every week or every month,
Explain
you
the
would
difference
post-process
when you
logs.
came up with like a 1 pixel on every page and how
Yeah,
it
so
worked.
we came up with the concept of like, let's put a pixel on the page. And I mean, really, these other guys came up with that concept, but then we took it to the next level of aggregating data with a lot of JavaScript, of trying to like see every piece of data that we could gather by putting JavaScript.
So JP Interactives, which turned in, you can share the names that came through later.
Yeah.
I'll let you do that. But your first idea, you came up with the idea, and your clients would literally just have to put a one.
Yeah, so
A one
the biggest
byte
difference
pixel or something?
Yeah,
or
so
something?
they'd put a 1 pixel image basically on their website that had JavaScript associated in it that would send us data. Now, the reason why that was so different is
and innovative.
it was real time.
Yeah.
So like as you logged into our application, you would literally see your visitors hitting your website.
Like not Google Analytics,
not post.
Google
no,
Analytics
Google
was.
Analytics is completely a play off of what we did. Completely.
No, bottom line is instead of post processing a log from yesterday or last week, you're seeing real time results.
Yeah.
Right.
As fast as one thing we took a lot of pride in, as fast as you could sit there and hit refresh, you would see those data in your things that fast.
So how did you know moving from JP Graphics to JP Interactive to Superstats to everything? How did you know when to leave or move on from one business model and make the jump into the new products?
Well, it's kind of interesting because we skipped quite a bit there because as we were doing JP Graphics, we actually, Steve Jenkins was a good friend of mine, and I remember Steve once to me, he said, "John, I'm making money while I'm sleeping," right? Because he had these different websites that were making him money, and I had built and designed a lot of his websites for him. And I'm like, I need to come up with something where I'm making money while I'm sleeping. And so hence we tried a few different things and they didn't really take off. But one of the ones I did, I made a little website that was called Script Search. Yeah. And it was all the CGI scripts that kind of back end make up the internet. Well, Josh and I, we made that website and we invested maybe $3,000 into it. And then like 6 months later, we sold it for $200,000 to Mkel Media Corporation, who did like CNET and all that. And so once we sold that, we're like, man, we have some money that we can now invest into our stats because we had already started the stats application. It was starting to grow really well too. And we just saw that growth. It was growing like crazy. Yeah. Because what we did is we exchanged stats for a banner on your website. So it was actually all ad driven at first.
What do you mean?
Think link exchange, except for if you wanted stats about your website, we would actually put an ad banner. We were an ad server. And we'd put an ad banner on your website at the bottom of your website or top, wherever you put it. And then we'd exchange, give you statistics about your website as long as there's an ad banner on your website.
So you would you'd be promoting third-party businesses.
We were just promoting us.
You were promoting yourself.
So you had huge virality.
So the virality was massive. I mean, I think, we got to like 100,000 page views a day, like within a month.
Yeah.
And it was just growing exponentially. I mean, we went from 0 to like 2 million customers in like a matter of 2 years.
So when did you flip the model to actually be a paid service then?
That was during the internet crash.
Yeah. So, but bottom line is for a few years, and you got up to several $1 million of revenue in an ad-supported web
4 million
in a web analytics company, $4 million web analytics company. But then you realized you might be capped out a little.
Yeah. I mean, I think that could have kept growing in some ways if we had tried to figure it out. But we had a few big customers. And at this time, you changed from JP Interactive to the name Superstats. Yeah, and mycomputer.com.
That's when I invested.
We actually started. I mean, this.
My computer was after Superstats.
It would take a long time to explain. But we basically had the stats application, and then we changed to mycomputer.com, and we started just having all these tools that you could use on your website, whether it was a guest book, whether it was a polling system, whatever you need on your website, you could just stick a piece of JavaScript and it just showed up on your website.
Right.
So let's tell my story when I met you, because it was Superstats before you became My Computer, because it went through the name changes, which just kind of evolved the products you had too, right? Yeah. So Superstats, I heard about you. I was up in Seattle. My company had gone public, and I flew down here, Provo, Utah, went to a second floor office on Center Street in little downtown Provo, and walked in, and I met you and Josh, and we talked. And right then and there, I got my checkbook out and wrote you guys a $110,000 check.
Thank you. And then we just wasted it. No, I'm sorry. No.
But yeah,
I think it turned out all right.
Yeah,
right?
and telling the story, I'm open about it because it was $1.10 a share, so I got 100,000 shares, and it's fun to see how it goes. Maybe later when you tell the public story, I'll say what happened to me. But
yeah. I mean, obviously, it was a long road. We had all these different products that we started to launch at mycomputer.com, but one thing that we realized was that these small businesses would just come and go really fast. And we'd call up somebody and we're like, hey, why did you cancel Superstats? Like, what did you not like about the product?
We went out of business?
Yeah, they're like, we loved your product, but we just went out of business.
Yeah.
But then we had some big companies that were using us, and they loved us, and they just kept buying more and kept using us. And so then we decided, you know what, let's get rid of our small business offerings and let's just focus on just the enterprise analytics.
Yeah.
And so that's what we ended up doing. And that's when really the lights like turned on for us and we just started growing like
So changing from
crazy.
advertiser supported to subscription model.
Yeah.
So you had that.
Well, that even happened earlier because when the internet crash happened, just everybody stopped buying ads.
Yeah.
So we actually ended up having to switch to a paid model. We even had to let some people go. I think long term it would have ended up working out because people kept buying ads, but like everybody lost interest in ads for like 2 years.
Because the CPM, the cost per thousand of impressions of banner ads crashed.
Yeah. And so we sent an email out to all 2 million users saying, pay us or be gone, basically. And we had about 30,000 switch to a paying account.
And what did you first charge for that product? Like what do you remember?
It was $10 to $29 a month.
A month.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at what point did you kind of switch into that enterprise focused mode?
So we already had a few enterprise customers.
Yeah.
But that was then we just decided that we needed to finance the company better. So we decided to sell off the small business people.
Yeah.
And then we took the proceeds of selling that off, which was about $4 million that we sold. I believe we sold it for $4 million. Now, honestly, all this has been so long.
Yes. Switching to enterprise.
I mean, what year are we at right now? This is post crash.
This is like 2000-ish, 2002 probably, something like that.
Well, so we did miss one story though in there, and I don't know the timing. You're switching from ad supported to enterprise subscription model was a huge inflection point.
Yeah.
When was the sale of the company that fell through? And tell that story a little bit.
Oh yeah, because we had at one point that we had a company,
an acquisition offer?
NetObjects, actually. If you
NetObjects was the name of the company.
Yeah, they were a website builder software. They wanted to acquire us because we were all these additional tools. Actually, it was really smart for them because they were like, "Oh, we help these people build the site, but your tools allow us to get more income."
If I remember the timing, just for our listeners and viewers to understand, this was an interesting time. The year 2000, from December 99 to March of 2000, the internet went berserk.
Yeah.
Valuations 10x'd on almost every company. The amount of money being made those 4 months was insane beyond anything we've ever seen.
Yeah.
Even the crazy stuff of the last few years in 2020, 21, the 4 months was crazy.
Yeah, unfortunately, we were in Utah, so we didn't necessarily feel all of that. Although we were getting a good valuation.
But what happened was March started the crash of the dot-com era.
Yeah.
I think your deal was going through around March, April of 2000, wasn't it? Yeah.
And honestly, when you really look at it, we were only $4 million in revenue, and we got an offer for $60 million
65,
to buy the company. $60 million.
Wow, unlike that ad-supported subscription.
But we were
model?
growing like crazy.
Yeah,
we were growing like crazy.
Yeah,
so.
but here, and so I flew down for the announcement, the big announcement. We were all here. And announcement, and then because this is what happened in that dot-com era, and I could tell many other entrepreneurs with this story, announced deals, partially deposited deals, fell through like crazy. And what happened to you? Tell what happened to you.
Yeah, it fell apart and ended up
the next day.
It was it literally was like a day or two. It fell apart, and all of a sudden we had to figure out what to do because we were burning money.
Yeah.
We ended up having to let go of about 70% of our staff.
Basically, that led to what you've told me, and I don't know if you don't want to talk about it, you don't have to, but you consider it the worst day of your business life.
Yeah, I mean, that was really rough. I mean, the hardest day really was letting all the people go because we had already scheduled our company Christmas party, and Josh and I knew we were going to have to let all these people go, but it was literally like the next day. So we decided to just smile and let the company Christmas party happen. Like they could have one last thing because it's all paid for already. It's like, what were we going to do?
Yeah.
And so we basically did it. And then like the next day or two,
So let me get this straight. Between your Christmas party in December and Christmas Day, you had to let 70% go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was not fun.
And we had no money, so we couldn't do any severance or anything. And I mean, to roll forward, we ended up paying all those people severance years later when we
This
finally
is the
had
most
money.
amazing story. Let's not wash over that. So you and Josh has told me the same thing. One of the worst business experience of his life, right? Right before Christmas. But years later, after you two are mega successful, you went back and did what?
We sent all those people severance checks.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. That's
amazing. I'm seriously, it's incredible.
Well, I mean, I think both Josh and I are, I think, empathetic people, and we care deeply. I think sometimes Josh gets a bad rap sometimes as not being that person, but he is. I think he just has a lot more attention than I get sometimes, so he gets drawn by so many people.
Josh James has never been anything but nice and respectful to me in my entire decades of knowing him.
Yeah. And that is Josh. That's who he is. And so, he absolutely wanted to do that. I was always supportive of all those things because I'm the same way.
Yeah. I don't know if you know, after I invested, Josh, and then you had, I'm trying to remember their last name. He was the son of a prominent BYU professor that was one of your head of sales. They would come to Seattle with me because you were trying to close deals in Seattle. Come to my house, mentor with us and
That's
stuff.
who it was.
Yeah. Who was it?
Probably it was Jeff Skousen.
Yeah, Skousen, exactly. Yeah. Sorry, Jeff. Couldn't
And
remember the name.
Jeff's actually with Josh at Domo.
He is. That's how. Yeah. So Jeff and Josh.
I think he's president of
They
Domo.
came to my house. I had just built over there and visit with me, and we would mentor a little bit. It was those were the days. Anyway.
So my question to you is obviously we talked about the acquisition of Omniture to Adobe for 1.8, and so you went through this tough time. Then you started coming out of it and selling those enterprise clients, focusing on those big boys that were writing big checks that were steady Freddies.
Yeah.
At what point did you know you were going to sell, or at least like the value that you were creating? And when did you maybe even figure out the actual dollar amount of that kind of deal? Well, and where were you? Like, what were you feeling?
I'm wondering, before we do that, let's go from changing enterprise and what I was experiencing, what you're the most exciting things that were happening from when you went to enterprise and before it was
when we got rid of the small business stuff and we switched to enterprise. And it's funny how finding your right market just really makes
it's called product market fit.
Yeah, your product market fit has to be there. It's kind of ironic because we had a great product, people loved it, but
wrong market.
It was still just the wrong people.
It was kind of tapping.
So when we switched into the enterprise, it really was just like the lights turned on.
Yeah.
And we started doubling every single year.
Do you know what? You personally came and said, John, we had 9 million revenue last year. Then you go, and then you'd come back a few months later, we're going to get 26 million this year. And then you came back and said 72 million this next year. And then you came back, and then it was 120 million.
Yeah.
And then, now we're getting close to the sale and the Adobe, and then you went public.
Well, I think,
and then Adobe come out,
we had done 320 million
the
year before. And then I think we were almost on a $500 million run rate when we sold.
Yeah.
So, but those from changing to enterprise, it was so fun. I had the experience of the arc of an experience of going public with my own company. And then this was an experience as an investor, a venture investor, early stage, watching a company go from the full arc from 2 guys to going public and then being acquired by one of the largest software companies in the world and seeing it. And it was just so fun. Your excitement coming, reporting what was going on. It was so fun.
Yeah. I mean, I think being part of high growth is really exciting. And it's obviously getting that right formula is so difficult.
Yeah, but the enterprise piece of it is every entrepreneur that we're mentoring or that are in our ecosystem, enterprise sales is super hard. Making that jump from small,
because it's changed. I think we keep thinking you can operate the same. And I see this right now because I see a lot of people who even used to work with me and feel like they understood that whole sales model. And then they go into these new companies and it's just not working anymore because I think we have seen more of the consumerization of enterprise software. I think we're seeing much more of that PLG motion and everything that people are expecting.
Yeah.
And think how many people call you now versus used to call you, back 20 years ago.
Well, that's also Tyler and I have, we're doing the venture fund, of which you, by the way, are a major investor in it. We really appreciate you. And you serve on our limited partner advisory committee. So you know all about that. But we meet with a lot of people. And it's just so fascinating right now to see what's going on with some of these companies because there was a Sassageddon with the 2022 rate interest hikes, right? And people were not just laying off, or companies were not just laying off people, they were laying off SaaS companies. And so one time we were at a meeting and they go, somebody had to analyze what was going on. And they said, I came into about a $100 million company, valued at 100 million, maybe 10, 20 million of revenue, or maybe it was more revenue than that. And they just asked us, guess how many SaaS subscriptions that company has? And so I knew it was going to be high because they were asking. So I went 105. And it was 270 different SaaS subscriptions. So they got in a conference room and said, we got to cancel 25% of these.
Yeah. It's funny because I also love them. Like we use tons of SaaS software at ObservePoint and it's so great. Like,
but selling now is harder because the moniker is deserved on Omniture, one of the great first SaaS businesses. There's no doubt that's true worldwide.
But I think the overall principle is if you actually create value in a good product, people want it.
So here's something I've been thinking about a lot because I'm going through a lot of this transition at ObservePoint right now because ObservePoint has been a very enterprise sales company. We're starting to go a lot more PLG, a lot more self-service. And I think when you have an enterprise sales company, the problem is that you can build really bad product. Because you have this guy who's just convincing somebody to buy something. So then you actually mistakenly think your software is actually good and you actually have market fit because you happen to sell, let's say, $100,000 software package to some person. But I actually am of the belief that you don't really know if you've made a sale until the second sale with that person. When they actually renew is when the actual sale happens. I actually think the first sale in a SaaS software company is a paid trial. It's basically they're saying, you know what, we're going to try this out. We're going to see if we like this enough. Now, they maybe did a true free trial with you, but normally that's not big enough to really know if it works, right? So then they pay you $10,000 or $20,000, and then they're doing a real trial with you. And if you don't have them then sign up that second time, you've never really made the sale.
Really
we call that true engagement.
True
or
engagement.
just the renewal of
and this and just again for our listeners, viewers, this applies to everything. Let's take the mobile app world. Instantly mobile apps now, the real question for an investor, if they're going to go in a mobile app company, is they say, oh yeah, we're getting people signed. It's downloading the app, putting in some data that you give to get registered, and you use it the first day. And I want to know how many people came back a second day and used it. And the number of apps that achieve that is minuscule.
Well, if you think about
this concept,
the self-service model, right? And enterprise software is moving into this too, because I think everybody wants this. Like I always say, no, how many of us talked to the AWS rep? You know, we just started using it and then here we are. But we have to like look at that. Like I'll go to like a SaaS website and the very first thing now they're even doing is like just create an account. And I'm like, I don't even have enough trust with you yet to even give you my email. Like I need to see a little bit of your product before I'm even trusting you with an email, because we all know the moment we give them an email, the moment we give them any kind of phone number, it's like
you're getting bombarded.
I'm going to get bombarded from ADMs calling me, right? And so I think we're still figuring this all out. But I laugh when I see a lot of these super successful PLG companies add that enterprise button on their thing. Because they talk to some person and say, well, we got to do it this way. And why? Why didn't you just make it so that person could pay $1 million? You know, and again, I pay AWS like $500,000 a year. And I've never talked to any of those people.
You have to spend $1 billion to talk to a real person at AWS.
I actually do think they reach out here and there, but I actually use this as an example.
Same for Google AdWords, by the way. Let's not leave Google AdWords.
You'll hear people always say like, oh no, they like to talk to our CSM and they want to implement. I'm like, if I worked with a piece of software where they wanted to do a call every single month with me, all I'd be thinking about is how do I get rid of that piece of software? Like, it needs to be easy.
By the way, the coming generations, Tyler and I talk about this all the time. The coming generations are used to doing a lot of business and interactions without one-on-one personal interaction.
Well, ever since COVID, you know, and we've built ObservePoint now, you know, my current software company that I'm doing without really visiting people, you know, and we have accounts, you know, that are, I mean, our biggest accounts are just under $1 million a year. And most of those people, I actually don't know if we ever went and visited any of those people on premise. It's possible they came to our user conference or we saw them at Adobe Summit or something like that, but I'm pretty sure we never went there.
Right.
Hey, well, let's get back to your acquisition. But first, what was it like going public?
I know. We're like squirrels.
Yeah.
It's like,
let's talk about going public, and then let's talk about the acquisition. Then we want to get into some non-Omniture, non-business stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
so going public.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, my question was, when did you know that you had created enough of value and enough of a business to actually go public and or then later be acquired?
I think when the
like
banks
that?
are talking to you and they guide you, right? And
Is it a gradual process?
they want to see a certain amount of revenue. They want to see a certain amount of growth, all those kind of things.
And if you're hitting those numbers, then you're a huge candidate for it.
Yeah. And we were just barely there, right? I mean, I think we were like 120 million.
And also the macroeconomy has to cooperate.
Yeah.
05 and 06, you went public in 06, I think, right? 05 and 06 were boom times.
Well, no, I think when we eventually went public, I don't think there had even been a tech IPO for like 12 months.
Really? Okay. Yeah. But if you're a great company, but there's no IPOs going out, it's hard to go out.
I think you are right that 05, I think it was really hot because when we went, they originally thought we were going to go out at like $12 a share.
Yeah.
And we ended up going out at
six
or 650.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
And what happened? I just remembering because obviously as a shareholder I was very into it. But the interesting thing is it actually had cooled down a little by the time you got through because there's a process, months long, tons of money, way more accounts and attorneys than you ever want to spend time with, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then by that period, it was cooling down a little. So you guys actually went from 12 down to 7, 650 or 6.
I think, I can't remember.
But
6
you
or
got
650.
out.
It wasn't 7.
But you got out, and then what happened? But the whole experience,
Well,
how did you like going public? The process.
Well, I didn't personally do a lot of that, right? Because Josh always handled that side of the business. I wouldn't like it, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's not me. I just want to keep building stuff and working with customers. Like that's what I love.
Your role the whole time throughout Omniture was CTO, correct?
No.
He wasn't CTO.
Brett Ehrer was the CTO.
Okay.
I was
were you?
actually president.
President.
And then when we actually went public, we changed my title to EVP of customer success. I think that's what I was.
So let's talk about, that process there. But after going public, then your numbers were so good, your stock did what?
Yeah. I mean, we started going up like crazy. I mean, I think at one point, the highest we hit was $40 a share.
Wow.
And you literally acquired your previous number one competitor. Is that right?
Yeah. We ended up acquiring quite a few companies, but there was a company called Website Story who was like our biggest competitor, and we ended up acquiring them.
Yeah.
We acquired another analytics company called Visual Sciences.
And then right about this time, I think while you're still public, you retired.
Yeah.
Quote unquote.
Well, I think
Because I'm just saying that because one of the greatest parties of all time in Utah was your retirement.
Yeah. and I think the more people know me, that won't surprise people because I'm not super money driven. Yeah. I'm very philosophically driven and just principle driven. And I was tired and not tired of working. I actually don't mind working really hard, but I was just didn't feel like I was in that fun environment with my co-founder that I had started off with,
You were 10 years into it.
Yeah.
And I feel like, and I wasn't being treated like a partner in the company anymore. I think, Josh and I have had a lot of conversations about this, that I sat back and I said to myself, you know what, it's more important for me to stay friends with Josh than it is to be here at this company.
Yeah.
And, again, I'd already made 100 million, whatever, plus money. And so I was just like, I'm going to pull back so I can stay friends with Josh and stay friends with Brett. Which is actually kind of funny because actually I haven't even seen Brett in years and years and years.
Well, he went with Adobe for a long time, right? Yeah.
Brett, I don't think ever.
Oh, Brett Ehrer, you're saying. Oh, I thought you were saying Brett. Yeah. I thought you were talking about Brad. Sorry.
No, Brad. I mean, Brad came on board
later,
very late, who ended up becoming, the general manager of the Omniture business unit.
Yeah.
So it was just a decision of like, you know what, I'm just going to be on the board. I'm just going to let you guys do your thing. We were so big at the time that I don't think all my product direction was quite as necessary, even though I had worked with the product team and given them tons of ideas, which I saw them implement over even like the next 4 or 5 years after I'd even left.
Right.
So it was just
time.
It was just time.
Yeah.
You
I wish it wasn't. I mean, I wish we could have stayed there, and it was just dumb little things, that I think could have changed.
So how much time were you actually there for in the life of the company? You were there 10 years?
13 years.
13 years was total time?
From total, yeah.
I think a lot of entrepreneurs just don't understand how much time it actually takes.
Well, what's crazy is now I see tons of people kind of retiring from over there at Adobe who, we had hired originally, and they were like, oh,
from the Omniture
finishing
days?
18 years at Adobe or 20 years at Adobe. It's like, which they mean Omniture and Adobe. But I was like, oh, you were there a lot longer than me.
Yeah. Well, as a member of the venture ecosystem generally, and here in Utah, which is just a great environment, I think what you've accomplished is amazing. And, not as saying that just as a friend, I meant what I said. It'd be sagebrush in the tech center of Utah.
Yeah,
if you hadn't done what you did and led the way with, and Josh and you were a great combustible
We
combination.
actually have a lot of great companies that, have come from former Omniture employees.
Just like a trickle effect.
Utah's history going back to actually hiring Science, which was a thing, gave birth to Novell and then WordPerfect. And then that was like the first generation of great tech companies in Utah. You were the leader of the second generation. Omniture gave birth to the next and propelled everything forward. And it's a virtuous cycle, right?
I mean, we definitely broke a lot of ground in the internet world here because nobody really respected Utah.
Yeah.
That's why we start. So Josh and I started Silicon Slopes. Right.
Yeah.
Josh came up with the name. Yeah. Really, it was mainly Josh's project, but it was all funded out of Omniture.
Yeah. And to bring attention to Utah.
And make Utah a place where people would want to come work, because we needed to import talent at the time, right? Yeah. So very good.
But outside of being a legendary entrepreneur, you are very passionate about also just advancing personal freedoms, free markets, liberty with your whole initiative with Libertas Institute.
I'm definitely a volunteerist, my whole personal philosophy.
And helping a lot of people. I'm going to tell you a story that'll lead into this so you can talk about some of the things. I've done charity things too. And one time I was at an event at the same table with John, with you, and I was talking to a person over here, and I was talking about this charity I'm doing and helping young entrepreneurs. And I was saying, we're just $10,000 short of our goal, and we just need that. And then I think we can just have it go really well. And you were like 2 or 3 seats over this way. And you said, John, what was that? And you asked me about it. I don't know if you remember this. You said, and you said, what was that? What are you working on? I said, well, we're doing this, and for these collegiate entrepreneurs, and we're 10,000 short on our goal. And you just said, you got it. Where do I send the check? And I go, well, are you serious? And you say, yep, you're there. It's there. No problem. I'll do it.
Yeah.
And a ton of people got blessed from that, and a lot of things happened because of you. And that's just the nature and the generosity. And I'm not, wanting to make your head big or just pump you up artificially in any way. You seriously are a genuinely good and nice person. And I can say that, and I'm going to say it. I've said it. And there's so many stories I could tell like that. But that one was just like, I didn't even ask you. And you overheard something and made it happen.
Yeah. So where does that come from? Like, what are these personal initiatives? Where does this belief system come from? Or why is that the way you are?
It just came from my parents and how I was raised. And, I definitely have a belief that you should be doing good. I think what's interesting to me is I look at a lot of people and I laugh when they think they're doing good because they're asking somebody else to do good.
Yeah.
And that's how I think about the government. It's like somebody feels generous because they voted to have the government use force to steal from somebody and then give to somebody else, right? Type of a thing, because the government doesn't actually create productivity.
Yeah.
And I think, the number one thing is look at yourself and saying, what am I doing to solve problems in the world? And what am I doing to help those around me? Am I really a kind person who cares about homelessness if I'm not willing to have a homeless person even live close to me, because I don't want my neighborhood to look bad.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think this will be a funny little story. This involves John.
Okay, let's hear it.
So John, ran Google Fiber here for a little while. And and I've been I'm very political overall and fighting for freedom. I'm actually never trying to get the government to give me anything. I'm just trying to get the government out of people's lives to let them take care of themselves.
Libertas is a libertarian organization.
Yeah. So my sister moved to Provo, and she had this house, and we couldn't get internet because Google was saying, we're just not doing any more installs right now. And we're like, well, what else would we do?
Extending the network and building new fiber.
Yeah, they're not doing anything.
Yeah.
I think it was even just installs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, and we're like, what? Well, what else we use? They're like, well, there is nothing else. We're like, okay, so we just can't have internet. And I'm like, this is messed up. So I'm like, my sister calls me, says this. I'm like, give me a second. And I call up John. I'm like, John, what is going on? My sister is here in Provo and she can't get Google Fiber turned on.
Yeah.
They're just not allowing new customers right now. And he was like, give me a second. And then he's like, oh, she actually even has it. Like, we can just turn it on. Like, and I'm like, well, can you do this? She's like, oh, well, don't tell anybody that I did this for you. And he turned it on. Like, and she had internet, like, basically that day.
Yeah.
And it was just so funny because this reminds me of politicians all the time. It's like, I've always had the governor's phone number, and I've always had the other people's phone numbers, and I can make these calls, and I can't tell you how much it bothered me.
Yeah.
That I had to make a phone call
and
pull some kind of favor to make the obvious happen that nobody should happen. And I've always wanted to fight for those people who can't make the phone call.
Right.
I can't even tell you how much it eats me up.
So with that in mind, like what is your take on the current presidency and what's happening on a more macro country level right now? Like where
I love trying to get the budget under control.
So you're all about the Doge effort. This is a safe place, John.
Safe place with everybody. I've always been that person who nobody I ever vote for wins. Yeah. Right. Because I'm always voting very libertarian, very freedom minded, kind of the Ron Paul-esque, just believe that those things work themselves out. Like I truly believe getting the government out of most things and just having them be referees and not playing in the game helps everybody. It will elevate all the poorest of people and just make everything better. But a lot of people misunderstand that because I'm also like anti-patent, anti a lot of things where that's protectionism by the government for big corporations and people like that. I actually don't even think we'd have a lot of big corporations if we didn't have a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I think that somebody should be able to steal completely from somebody. And I don't know what system we can come up with that could work well for that.
The middle grounds, yeah.
Some kind of system. But I just... Sorry, now my head's all over the place. What were we? How did we get to that?
Just on what do you think of Doge and the cutting of the government and all that? Yeah.
So it's like
layoffs.
I want to control and get government all these things, and we unfortunately live in a situation where they've used the budgets and all these things to buy basically favors from people. I mean, I actually think it should be criminal for a politician to sit up and say, "If you elect me, I'm going to do this for you." Like, okay. And what's the other thing they always do? They're always like, don't worry. If we want to have something happen in our city, all the people who can't vote in the city are going to pay for that. And how that normally happens is like I own buildings in Provo. Mm-hmm. Well, I can vote as a citizen, but as a property owner, I actually don't get a vote on my building that I own. So they'll say, oh, well, if it's your primary property, let's say on property tax, you'll only pay 0.5%, but everybody else pays 1%.
Yeah.
And none of those people can vote against it, right? And so there's all this taxation without representation happening all over the place. And I don't know, we have to figure something out. Like I definitely would love to see us also switch to like a fair tax or something like that. To take power away from
generally
these people.
Speaking though, I think you would agree, we would all agree. And there's, we got to do things right and be careful with people and all that. But the federal government is bloated.
Oh, actually, I remember what I was saying. I was mentioning that because I always vote very, very libertarian. And this was the first time I actually was feeling like maybe I go a different way and it was mainly because of Elon Musk being involved and being willing to help. I actually have, it's funny how many people are attacking him right now, but I think it's the people who are getting basically paid,
or exposed.
They're being exposed that are not wanting this. I'm very confident that Elon Musk's motives are that he just wants to help the country. And I'm laughing right now too, because everybody's like, he wasn't elected. I'm like, well, yeah, he's not doing elected things. He's like all these organizations, none of those people were elected.
He's on an 18-month. He was given 18 months. It terminates in 18 months.
Well, he's a consultant, no different than any other consultants. Like most people in the government of the millions of employees weren't elected.
And I keep thinking about, like, let's just take NASA. Literally, he is doing things in space at 1/1000th of the cost of NASA.
I know.
Isn't that who we want to run some programs?
Yeah.
Well, and it's fascinating
and tighten them up. Yeah.
Did you guys read the article that was talking about how we basically had 4 software engineers that went in to start analyzing and stuff.
Analyzing all the receipts.
Yeah, so amazing.
And
I was like, can he come to Provo and do that too?
I know.
Did you see the latest thing though about the Social Security ages and how they're marked alive or dead? And there's like 12 million people in the country right now that
150
are
years
over
old.
120 years old, and he's like, he makes a comment on Twitter.
Out.
He's like, oh man, maybe Twilight vampires are real. And people do live to 150 years old.
It's hard to know, like even what's real, like to comment on.
So, but a lot of
because they saw that Treasury thing too that they just posted yesterday or whatever, like the $4.7 trillion in the Treasury that they actually have no accounting for.
Yeah. Well, did you see his Oval Office interview? That where he was in the Oval Office with Trump. I mean, it was like a 45 minutes of his first talking since being, actually starting the Doge initiative since like inauguration. And man, just everything he was saying is like, look, this is just common sense stuff. Like we are overspending.
It's not really a political issue. It's about just our federal government is taking our money and taxation. We want it to be as low as possible if you're an average regular person, right? We don't want to fund boondoggle crazy stuff. Just operate efficiently. That's all we're asking.
We need to figure out common sense legislation on like even environmentalism and things like that. Because I'm a huge environmental person. Like we should not be polluting this world. We should be taking care of it. But we need to common sense things because we're still polluting the world, even if all of a sudden we're just like outsourcing pollution to China or something like that. It's like we need to figure out. You mean
their oil and our oil pollutes the world the same?
Yeah, exactly. Eventually we're going to damage the earth, and we are damaging the earth on things. So we need to figure that out. And I hope that one thing I do like about Trump, even though there are so many things, like I would never have voted for him before, ever.
Yeah.
And there's so much I dislike about the guy.
Yeah.
Just more personally, like how he carries himself.
Yeah, his showmanship.
And just like be more real.
Yeah.
Where I loved Vivek. I actually liked his authenticity. It felt way more real. And Elon, I feel, is very authentic. Like, exactly where the guy stands, And Trump's lots of cases you do too. The tariff stuff scares me a little bit because I do think that's just more tax on all of us as people. Like,
Did you see what Trump did say about the tariffs? He's going to be reciprocal. He's going to say anything that their other countries are tariffing us, I'm just going to tariff them back.
That's actually really fascinating because I've thought about that a lot, and I always thought, well, if I was president, that's what I would do. I'd actually say, look, we don't do tariffs, but if you tariff this, we will also tariff you.
Yeah, and that was yesterday. He literally announced that yesterday.
Well, one of the things I've learned, because of tariffs, all this talk about it, I decided to study a little bit. And one of the things I've learned about tariffs, though, is actually tariffs don't cause inflation generally, and they're actually just a great negotiation leverage point. But just take the coffee thing, where they was going to do Colombia. The actual thing that would happen is if we did a big tariff on Colombian coffee, yes, Colombian coffee would not be coming to the United States because it'd be so expensive. But all the other coffee producers around the world, and there's many of them, the countries that export coffee as a main export, they will say, oh, let's go grab the 8% Colombian market share and grab it right now. And let's offer discounts to win that market share. We actually could have it go down in price.
It's more, I think for me, it's more of the principle of just the government making those decisions and meddling.
But
because if you remember
if they do it to protect us because another country's doing it to us, maybe that's okay.
Well, and I think that if we would let states do it, states would also put tariffs on to try and protect their citizens. You know, so like, where do you draw the line? And
these are complex issues, and I generally also really like what you're doing with Libertas and the Libertarian. And like, I have one big question on technology because I know you think about this. energy is one of the most important things to make the future and to make this world go in modern. In the last 200 years, energy has been super important, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on nuclear power as a solution?
We should have been embracing it years ago. It's gotten so much safer.
Yep.
And I think, again, that's just the government. We had fear there for a long time, but I think it's really one of the only solutions for like clean energy.
Footprint is low.
Yeah.
Waste and pollution is low.
Yeah. Just everything about it.
Yeah.
And then I actually have always thought, like, if we embrace that and even embrace a lot more desalinization too, we could have more water, more energy than we'd ever need.
Do you think the energy race is as important as everybody's making it right now? Like
I do.
As with AI and
with the electrical power, nuclear.
Well, AI is a whole other discussion, I think there is.
We'll bring you back for a big AI discussion sometime.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Because we've only got a couple minutes.
Yeah, we got.
I thought what we do is you and I.
Can I make one final just political thing? Because I think,
of course.
I mean, obviously this is more about startups, and I think the one thing that we need to make sure is that what all of us want is just stability.
Yeah.
I actually think even if you just froze the laws right now exactly how they were,
and we knew what it was,
and we just knew, and there was no changing it, how much that would help the startup ecosystem, just businesses, because you just know what you're dealing with. I mean, what I'm worried about is 4 years from now when the next president just decides to reverse everything. And then we're like, oh my gosh, what do we even do as a company?
Yeah.
So
you're just saying every 4 years it's flip-floppy.
It's just like we need stability, and we need to just know the rules of the game that we're playing so that we can have confidence in where
Matter
we're
of fact, let's end on two things then. One thing is thank you for Libertas being such a big player in getting the sandbox legislation in Utah. Utah is a leader now because, and to our viewers and listeners, you should know that sandbox laws mean startups and entrepreneurs can actually break regulations and laws with approval with the sandbox laws in place for a while to see if what they're doing that's technically breaking some regulation or law is actually better for society. And then they prove it out, and then those laws that were prohibiting it get changed, and you and Libertas are a chief reason why that exists in Utah. Is that correct?
And Libertas is also a national organization now. We actually, so if anybody wants to go check it out, but we did the sandbox regulations, and that has
Libertas.org.
Has been mimicked throughout the country now in different environments.
That's
we
awesome.
set a lot. We've won numerous awards from a free markets, think tank.
And that's really important entrepreneurship, because a startup wondering, am I going to get in trouble for this or that? And a matter of fact, we love the All On podcast as well. And I just listened to it. And Naval was talking about how he tried to do something innovative with AngelList, and the SEC and all that came down on him like crazy. And then he had to go spend time Washington, D.C., and they changed the laws because he figured out a better way.
So it was interesting. You guys probably ran into this when all the Bitcoin stuff, all these cryptocurrencies, I'd had all these people pitching me on all these things, and I'm looking at them going, you people are ignorant. I'm like, it really is about who controls the laws in this. It doesn't matter what you think you can get away with. And we see this in the libertarian movement a lot because they get all super principled, and I'm like, all that matters is who has the guns. I mean, well, you can think your Bitcoin's secure, but if like somebody shows up and points a gun to you, you're probably going to give them your key because you don't want to die. So it's
we talked about that. Hey, let's end on something really interesting.
Fascinating.
No,
just to wrap that up.
Wrap it up. You and I are in the same friend group, and we have traveled the world together. True?
Yeah, true.
Okay. And so we have a lot of fun with that. And we've been to many, many places together and done lots of things. I just want to ask you, what's your very favorite place to go visit, travel, or experience? What is, like, if you had to rank them on the combination of, I loved going there, it was fascinating, stimulating, what would you put at the very top?
Well, I'm going to give you two answers. My very first place to go is just to go someplace warm and golf and enjoy some pool time. So I love Palm Springs. That's like my very favorite, just go have a great time. My very favorite place that I've ever traveled was with you, and when we went to India. And it was interesting because
I've heard pretty negative things about
India. So this is what's interesting. Half of our group just absolutely hated it. Half of our group loved it. And the group that hated it was because it is dirty, and it's just so different than here. And
I think it's the society at every level of a culture. It's the culture most different from ours.
Yes. And so I think a lot of people just, when we go into like a city and like we're being inundated by people, and the noise and the smells and all this kind of stuff. A lot of people, that was like just too much. They couldn't handle it. I was fascinated by it.
Yeah.
Like, I just thought it was a beautiful people and a beautiful
the anecdotal
culture.
Stories we came back with.
And like, I haven't been back since, you and I went, but I would totally go back and experience more.
But why were you, what was the fascination?
There's just so much fascination.
It's
but like what?
That's a whole podcast unto itself. But like, but I mean, I actually was fascinated by like the diversity in that culture, like from the super wealthy down to the poorest of poor.
I'll give you quick samples, and we don't have time for this, but I'm going to anyway.
It's
like,
okay.
The cow thing's real.
Yeah.
More real and more sincere and more serious than you ever thought.
Yeah.
The Hare Krishnas, which I used to think of as just kind of strange people at an airport growing up, are actually one of the nicest, most reasonable, charity, service-oriented religions I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I mean, those two things. We don't have time to get into it, but India's fascinating.
But India.
Well, it sounds like we should go back.
Yeah, there we go.
Looks like I need to go. Let's go.
Thank John.
Yes. Yeah. I am so happy you came. And
I just hope this made sense for anybody else who was listening to this. Like,
well, it's just like we filmed.
Obviously, you guys have seen into like when we go golfing, the three of us, this is what happens the whole round.
But a lot of entrepreneurial and venture principles were in this episode.
Yeah. And it's always back to entrepreneurship, startups, how the ecosystem is impacted by our conversations. And I hope you guys, the listeners and viewers, got a little bit out of this podcast, and it wasn't just bro conversation between John and Tyler. But
I think a good thing for them is to think about how they're getting like a full PLG process in the software world mixed with enterprise sales.
Yeah.
That's the good balance.
Among many others today. Yeah.
But yes,
wrap it up.
We're wrapping it up, and thank you so much for watching, and thank you to JP for coming out. And we kind of dragged him here. He was a little bit sick, and we said, "Come on, we need you on the podcast." So we're very thankful for that. But like, subscribe, share, and hit us up with any questions. Let us know in the comments what you're thinking, what we can help you with. This has been the Startup Ignition Podcast.
Follow us.
Yep. And thank you so much. And again, thank you to JP. Thank you.
Thank you.